Types and kinds of properties. There are 4 property types or classifications: real property, personal property, businesses, and financial interests. 1. Real property. Real property is an interest in real estate. This interest is normally recorded in a formal document such as title deed or lease. Therefore, property is a legal concept distinct from real estate. It encompasses all the rights, interests, and benefits related to the ownership of real estate. In contrast, real estate encompasses the land itself, all things naturally occurring on the land, and all things attached to the land, such as buildings and site improvements. 2. Personal property. Valuers not only distinguish between real estate and real property, they also differentiate between real property, personal properties, and fixtures. Personal property includes movable items of real estate that are not permanently affixed to, or part of it. They generally consist of tangible items called chattels personal, and intangible personal property rights, known as chattels real, which may be created by lease. Historically, ownership rights to real estate for a fixed number of years were considered personal property. These rights were called chattels real to distinguish them from movable persona objects, chattels personal. Items of personal property include fixtures and fittings, furniture and equipment, trade fixtures, tenants, fixtures and furnishings that are not built into a structure. 3. Businesses. A business is any commercial, industrial, service, or investment entity pursuing an economic activity. Businesses are generally profit-making entities operating to provide consumers with products and services. 4. Financial interests. Financial interests in property result from the legal division of ownership interests in business and real property, e.g. partnerships, syndicate-ions, corporations, co-tenancies, joint ventures, from the contractual grant of an optional right to buy or sell property, e.g. stocks, or other financial instruments, at a stated price within a specific period, or from the creation of investment instruments secured by pooled real estate assets. Kinds of real estate. Residential, houses, flats, flatlets, condominiums, maisonettes, duplexes, tenements, etc. Commercial, shops and offices, parking lots/house, conference centers, cold storage, petrol filling stations, service garages, markets and market stalls, food preservations, restaurants and snacks bar, cinemas. Industrial, factories, warehouses, workshops, service buildings, large industrial plant and cottage industries. Recreational, hotels and tourism, parks and gardens, open spaces, stadia, race courses, golf courses, gyms, beach and resort homes, saunas and beauty salons, swimming pools, tennis/squash courts, etc. Agricultural, farmlands, grazing grounds, plantations, etc. Religious, churches, mosques, temples, shrines, etc. Historic and national monuments, cemeteries, squares, museums, galleries, etc. Educational, schools, colleges, universities, etc. Public properties, ministerial public building, parastatals office buildings, judiciary buildings, government staff quarters. Sectors of the property market, nature and attributes. (5.8.1) Accommodation land. Accommodation land denotes peripheral land surrounding a settlement. It is the next in line for development. These lands are usually sought after by speculators in anticipation of value appreciation. Attributes: in its accommodation state, the land sustains special uses as mechanic village, car parks, garden, etc. Accommodation land is subject to ground rents. 1. Residential property market. This market covers detached houses, semi-detached houses, row houses, terrace, duplex, flats and tenement buildings. High-class residences, low-density development, prestigious areas, good quality design and constructions, absence of nuisance, open space, aesthetics, access to service centers, good approaches, tarred roads, and good drainages, non-infiltration of alien uses. Strict land use controls and restrictive covenants, large-size plots for gardens, and security. Medium-density areas, good transportation facilities, good surroundings, proximity to parks and public garden, good schools in vicinity, absence of nuisance, good approaches, tarred roads, and security. High-density areas, good transportation facilities, availability of water, electricity, and other infrastructure facilities, proximity to parks and open spaces, schools, absence of nuisance, good access ways and drainage, proximity to place work, nearness to markets and shops, hospitals. Distant to noisy factories, chemical works and gas plants, well-defined streets and sidewalks, churches and places of entertainment. 2. Commercial property market. This market covers shops, offices, markets, and so on. Shops. from the one room in a tenement building to a multi-purpose departmental shops. Shops are generally a very sound form of investment and attractive to both private investors and corporate bodies. The security of this market lies in the reputation of goodwill that the tenant has built on many customers. He runs the risk of losing this if he has to move. Besides, his fixtures may be damaged during relocation. He is therefore not likely to default in the payment of his rent, thus making income regular and secure to the investor. Retail shop/market, street for display, good transportation facilities, nearness to residential neighborhoods, good sufficient area for proper display of goods, a rear or side street for the delivery of goods, safe pedestrian sidewalk to encourage windows shopping, continuity of shop fronts. Wholesale shop, sufficient area for storage and display of goods, ease of access, adequate parking space, proximity to high-class retail stores, proximity to freight transportation facilities, location amidst similar utilities, good and level streets for hauling. Warehouses/markets. Good communication includes nearness to trunk roads, rails or water transport facilities, adequate parking for hauling, accessibility for delivery and evacuation of goods, large area of general flat land, good access roads condition. Offices range from converted space within a residential block to purpose-built of various sizes and character. Investment in office property is also secure for the reason that the tenant will not want to lose credibility, his goodwill, or face premature ejection. Values depend on compliance with relevant laws and acts, location, securing good clients, e.g. CBD facilities available such as air conditioning, lifts, etc., the physical characteristic and type of tenants, ease of access from other parts of the town, to financial institutions. Case of intercommunication, parking spaces, and facilities, limited noise. 3. Industrial property market. This includes factories and large warehouses. Factories. Factories are often purpose-built, though very few buildings are adaptable to factories. Factories may be divided into two main types. Factories purposely built for special industrial purposes. Modern multi-purpose buildings generally easily adaptable for most light industrial purposes or warehousing. 4.8.4.1 Purpose-built factories. Not easily adaptable, e.g. Nepal's Egban power station at Akorada, specially designed and built for electricity generation. This is difficult to convert, beside, it is located close to their source of raw materials. Modern multi-purpose buildings. Easily adaptable for light industrial purposes or warehouses since heavy machinery are not in use. Attributes: cheap land, good water supply, nearness to large retail stores, in the case of light manufacturing, large land for expansion, good population for labor, availability of electricity and security. Location in relation to transport system, availability of market and raw materials. Other factors are the general layout of the buildings, construction, conditions, and facilities, e.g. open storage, and car parking. 4. Agricultural property market. This market is responsible for the production of food, which is the basic need of man. Most governments adopt agricultural support policies. The yield of this market is traditionally low, for it is a survival necessity enjoying people and government support programs. It covers farmland, farmhouses, ranches, orchards, and so on. The yield is low because there will always be a high demand for farm production. 2. Ownership of an agric estate gives high social standing. 3. Government aid is always forthcoming from designated agricultural banks. 14% per annum in interest rate, but Central Bank of Nigeria subsidies up to the tune of 6% as at March 2006. 4. Tax concessions for agricultural properties and machinery are forthcoming. Attributes. Availability of nearby market for disposal of farm produce. Topography and climate. The size of holding, e.g. a smaller farm, will yield higher returns per hectare. Natural features such as type and condition of the soil, water supply, soil fertility, and so on. The condition of fences and approach roads and the efficiency of land drainage. Availability of services, e.g. water supply, electricity. The provision and condition of farm buildings and dwellings. For other properties which do not have markets, such as most recreational, historical, and monuments, their attributes do not influence their respective values because they are not found in the market. In summary, the attributes of landed properties influence their values in one way or the other because these attributes are taken, for example, environmental factors like climatic conditions, topography, use to which the adjoining property is being put, its accessibility, and type of interest. Have to be taken cognizance of, in determining the yield to be used in capitalizing their net incomes. Leaseholds. A lease arises when a freeholder, lessor, grants either right of possessing or occupation from his interest to another party, lessee or leaseholder, usually for a consideration and with attendant covenants and conditions of such leases. The lessor's interest while the lease lasts is the reversion, while the lessee would have a valuable interest if he enjoys a profit rent.
Can you go on, please?
Should the lessee not have a profit rent, e.g. where he is occupying at full rental value, FRV, the value of his occupation becomes subjective and limited to the right to renew at expiry or right of extension of lease as the case may be. Leases are usually described on the basis of their length or period of grant, hence, we have short-term, 2 to 5 years, medium, 6 to 10 years, and long-term, above 10 years. The following are the principal types of lease. 1. Building/ground leases. Leases of land ripe for building under which the lessee undertakes to pay a yearly ground rent. The lessee may erect buildings on the land and keep the buildings in tenantable repair and pay all outgoings in connection with them throughout the term. The difference between the ground rent payable and the net rent obtainable from the buildings when erected will constitute the lessee's profit rent or net income. It is usually granted for 99 years or longer. 2. Occupation leases. Occupational lease means leasing of land and building for occupation by the lessee. The length of term varies. In case of medium and long-term leases, it is standard practice to incorporate a rent revision or rent review clause. This is usually on an escalation, upward, basis. Note: when the rent reserved under an occupational lease represents the full rental value of land and building or near it, it is called market rent or rack rent. When rent reserve is less than the FRV, but not a ground rent, it is called a head rent. 3. Subleases. Subject to the terms of his head lease, a leaseholder may sublease the property for a term less than what he holds, either at the same rent or higher rent, seldom at lower rent. In this way, the head lessee becomes entitled to a reversion. A reversion is necessary to preserve the nature of a sublease. Forms of leases can be a straight lease, as between a freeholder and the lessee, a sublease, as between a freeholder, lessee, and sublessee, or an underlease, as between a freeholder, lessee, sublessee, and an underlessee. 4. Assignment, where a lessee grants the whole term of his lease to another. Such grant differs from a sublease. An assignment is a transfer of interest either from the freeholder or the leaseholder, usually for a consideration. The assignee takes over the full responsibility and liabilities of the interest transferred, which includes the terms and conditions that are contained in the document which the assignor is transferring to him. 5. Short-term agreement. These tenancies are for occupation for periods less than 3 years. Maximum economic rent is usually payable under this form of tenancy, and the shortness of the term prevents any substantial value attaching to the tenant's interests. Short-term agreements include periodic tenancies such as weekly, monthly, or yearly tenancies. 6. Lease for life, life estates or interests. As its name connotes, this type of interest lasts for life only. The expression life estate usually denoted that the measuring life was the life of the tenant himself, e.g. when a grant was made to a lasted for life only. It means A has enjoyment over the land inter vivos, i.e. during his lifetime only. It cannot be inherited in fee simple or in fee tail. There can also be a form or life estate which deals with the life of another, e.g. a grant made to A as long as B lives. The grant will come to an end when B dies because B's life is the measuring life. However, let us note that grant for life is for an uncertain period, and this increases the associated risks. By the Law of Property Acts 1925, these leases for life now take effect as leases for 99 years, determinable on the death of the party in question by notice from either side. Four 4.3.2.6 Mining lease. This is a lease for mining and related purposes. It comprises an estate for years, usually shorter than the building lease. The consideration is, more often than not, a small fixed rent with the addition of royalties, the amount of which is tied to the quantity of minerals taken. Restrictive covenants. Land, whether leased or not, may be subject to restrictions as to user. Easements or restrictive covenants may prevent land being used for business purposes or prohibit the erection of houses costing less than a stipulated figure. Such restrictions are often inserted in leases. For instance, the lessee of a house may covenant not to use it except as a private dwelling house, or the lessee of a shop may covenant not to use it for any offensive trade or to use it for only one particular type of trade. Restrictions on the user of land are sometimes imposed for the benefit of neighboring land which the vendor is retaining, or to safeguard the general development of property in an area. For example, where a building estate is sold in freehold plots to various purchasers, each purchaser usually enters into covenants as regards the use of land. Normally, such covenants are mutually enforceable between the various purchasers and their successors in title. Co-ownership. Land may be owned by two or more persons either by way of joint tenancy or tenancy in common. In a joint tenancy, the parties have equal rights to the benefits of the property, but when one joint tenant dies, his share passes to the surviving joint tenants by survivorship. In a tenancy in common, shares are individual, i.e. there are no physical partition of the property, but not necessarily equal. Thus, one tenant in common might hold a quarter share, another a half share, and so on. There is no survivorship, as in joint tenancies, for if one tenant in common dies his shares passes under his will or intestacy. Transfer of interests in land. The rules of the law of property in land have evolved chiefly in connection with transfers of ownership. A life interest is a right which cannot be transferred at the life owner's death because that is the time when it comes to an end, but it can be transferred for so long as he remains alive, e.g. for mortgage purposes. The legal freehold, on the other hand, is perpetual in its duration, and so can be transferred by a current owner inter vivos, during his lifetime, or at his death. The same is true in the principle of leaseholds, except that the term of a leasehold may end while its holder is still alive, in which case, no property right remains to him in respect of it. The valuer needs to take proper account of these various characteristics because what he is valuing is not land in the purely physical sense, but property rights in land. Transfer inter vivos occurs either by gift or by sale and can take the form of grants of new leases, and assignment of existing leases. A gift of land on death or inter vivos require the carrying out of the appropriate execution of the deed of assignment, lease or